doesn't know yet, we have a new ranking minority member. We're really sad to lose Representative Weigel in that position, but the minority party will do what the minority party does, and we're very happy to have Representative Poskin serving in that position. With that, are there any bill introductions today? I know this is a bill-heavy, policy-heavy committee. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Next thing on the agenda is introduction of committee members and staff. We have a new committee assistant, Susan Tyndale. Susan, can you stand up and let everybody see you? And we're awful lucky to have Susan. You know, she's available to all of you as we go through the year. She's doing a great job. Really happy to have her. Because Aaron's on leave right now, we have a new lead researcher at Division of Legislative Research. It's Merle Riedel. Would you like to say anything, Merle? And do you have anybody else to introduce? I'll let you do the introductions of your people.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, my name is Merle Riedel. This is my third legislative session, and you'll hear from me. I have the budgets for the Department of Corrections, the Sentencing Commission, and the Adjutant General. And I do have a couple of additional folks in the audience today, some others that are covering down for Aaron. We even have one of our analysts online. So I'm going to be followed by Sharday Kane.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Sharday Kane, and I am in my second legislative session with Kansas Legislative Research Department, and I will be presenting the Kansas Bureau of Investigation budget before this committee. I look forward to working with you all.
And next, Mr. Chairman, we have Martin on WebEx, I think.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, committee, good afternoon. My name is Martin DeBoer. I'm hoping that you can hear me. And before this budget, this committee, I'll be presenting the budget for the Board of Indigent Defense Services, and this is my third session.
And then we have Dylan and just a couple more after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dylan Deere. This will be my 12th session. In Aaron's absence, I will take care of the Department of Transportation budget as best as I can. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Hey, and remind us of what your other serious level of technical expertise is for our committee, performance-based budgeting.
That's also true, yes. So I am the coordinator for performance-based budgeting as well. You can find the measures for the Department of Transportation as well as all other state agencies on the KLRD website. You should have also received an email with that document as well for all of the various state agencies. But if you have any questions about how the performance measures were arrived at, it's usually best to ask the agency, but you can ask me first, and I'll see if I can get the answer for you.
And then we have Megan.
In Aaron's absence, I'll be taking the budget of Kansas Highway Patrol. This is my third session.
And then Shirley.
Good afternoon. This is my 12th session, and I will be taking care of EMS and Fire Marshal for Aaron.
And last one is Harris.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Harris Sheikh. I'm a legislative fellow at KLRD. This is going to be my first session, and I will be taking care of the budgets of the Abstractors Board of Examiners as well as the Board of Tech Professions. Thank you.
And that concludes research staff, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Merle. And then we have our reviser, Chris Wagner, here with us today. Chris, would you like to say anything?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Wagner, as you said, from the Revisor of Statutes Office. This is my 6th session, and I'll handle any bill drafting briefs or requests that come up in the committee. I'll kind of bounce in and out depending on bill work that's done. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And our IT person, are you going to be here week after week, or do you know where you're going to be every week? And would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Logan Brown. This is my first session.
Okay, glad to have you, Logan. And then Merle, can you get us a list of all of our analysts and their contact information so that when we start to get closer to those budgets, we know who to contact? It's a little bit harder than it has been in the past. Next, if everybody will look in their folder, we've got the committee rules and the conferee rules. Also, we've got a list of contact information for each of the members. The committee rules did not change from last year. On the conferee rules, we did make one change. As long as we can get by with it, we requested 15 hard copies from conferees because some of us, myself included, are electronically documented challenged. So I think it's good, especially when we get into some of the bigger budgets, that we have real paper to kind of try to get all the information that we have. Is there anything else that anybody'd like to bring up, introductions or anything? Do you guys all want to introduce yourselves to everybody again? We really haven't had any changes in the committee. So do we have any committee members on Zoom? Just so that I know. No, we don't. Okay. All right. So committee, one of the things, I know some of the leadership, we've talked about this first week or two. I don't know if you're like me, but I've got a lot of email regarding concerns by some of the employees of the state of Kansas about pay, salary. I want to kind of bring us up to speed on some of the issues that I've got the most emails on, or some that were obvious carryovers from last year. So that's what we're going to try to do this week and next week. Also, we're going to go a little bit off that the Department of Transportation got some money for a pilot study on some alternative ways to fund transportation. It seems like we're going to have a lot more alternative fueled vehicles in the future. Anyway, they've got a pilot on that. So we're going to get some information on what industry and Department of Transportation forecast out in the future for electric vehicles primarily. So if you have anything else of interest until we receive our budget summaries from legislative research, let me know, and we may bring some of those things up just while we have this time right here. So, any questions on any of that? I think, do you have a agenda? I think tomorrow we're going to hear from Department of Corrections and Community Corrections. I don't know if you've got some of those emails. And then Thursday, I believe we're hearing from Board of Sentencing and bids on some of their wage issues. So you might want to pull your files from last year to bring yourself up to speed on some of those issues. Okay. See what else we have here. Okay. I guess the next thing that we'll go to is what's on the agenda, and it's a presentation on workforce report and current pay plans by Craig Knowlton, Office of Personnel Services and Department of Administration. And part of the purpose of today, we're also going to have a presentation by Merle Riedel, KLRD, is to understand what the administration thinks our role is in determining pay, and also what legislative research thinks our role is as they interpret or read the statutes, and then also kind of talk about what the administration's trying to do so that we've got a better understanding of some of the issues going forward. So Craig, welcome to the committee.
Thank you. That might help. My name is Craig Knowlton. I am the Director of Personnel Services in the Department of Administration. And today I'm here to provide an overview of the state's pay policies. I have a briefing that is very general, and so I figured we would go through that, and then if there are any specifics, I'd be happy to stand for any questions. So if we're okay with that, I'll just go ahead and get going. Okay. At the highest level, there are basically two different pay plans. You have the classified plan and then the unclassified plan. The classified pay plan is the one that most people recall. It's the old range and step model, the old classified pay matrix. And that is, you have the vertical axis of the pay grades, and then you have steps as the horizontal axis. There are 35 pay grades, and there are 20 steps. Now, that has changed over the years. It has grown, it has shrunk. That is where we're at right now. We have just added in the last couple of years some pay plans at the higher, or some pay grades at the higher end, as well as some steps at the lower end.
We don't have a copy of that, do we?
I don't think so. We have it out on our website. We can get you a copy of that for sure.
In your folder, the presentation, and I didn't upload.
It's not part of the presentation.
I don't think he presented it to us, or I don't think we got a,
Oh, that's okay.
okay.
We'll make sure and get that to you, get a copy
Okay.
to you. As far as how that's organized, the steps are roughly 2.5% apart, and then the pay grades are roughly 5% apart. And I say roughly because we can only round to the penny, so we can't get it exactly on every one. So for classified positions, each position must be assigned to a particular job classification, and then that job classification is assigned to a pay grade. So that basically establishes your range for that type of a position. So essentially, the new employees start at the lower end, but agencies do have the option to bring more experienced or those with exceptional qualifications on at higher steps. And then classified positions pursuant to statute, and it's KSA 752935. Again, I didn't provide copies of these, but we can get those to you if you need them. Classified positions are the default type of position in the state. Positions must fall within an exception within that same statute or be specifically identified in other statutes as unclassified. Now, the number of exceptions and the breadth of those exceptions have grown over the years. So at this point, we have more unclassified employees than classified employees. 10 years ago, that was not the case. So it has been a recent transition. For the unclassified pay plan, there really isn't a specified pay plan. It's essentially an open grade for any type of position. But in establishing the pay for those particular types of positions, the classified matrix is very often used as a framework or guideline for that. In executive branch agencies under the governor, those positions go through a review and approval process. So one of the things that my office does is to look at the type of work that's being done and make sure that the pay is appropriate for that, based on comparisons to the classified structure as well as market information and other types of things like internal equity. So unclassified positions don't have to fall within a particular job classification. That allows them to be a little bit more unique than your classified positions. So you can take duties from here and duties from there and add it to a position. So it doesn't have to fall in one of those job classifications that we have, which then has to be assigned. So they're very, very individual. And so there's a lot more flexibility, which was the main attraction for moving to that. So those are the two big types of plans that we have. Now, within those plans, you have various different types of plans that have been enacted, and they're enacted through various different methods. So the classified pay plan is maintained and administered by the Department of Administration, and that is pursuant to statute KSA 752938, and it must be approved by the governor. So the annual issuance of the classified matrix, that would include any changes to it. If there's a legislative increase that adjusts the entire pay plan, that is then issued through an executive directive. That also includes any time that we change the pay grade assignments of a particular job classification, that goes out via executive directive. So the classified pay plan long ago also used to include annual individual pay increases, which was step movement. So that would be movement along the horizontal axis for each individual employee. It was based on time in service and time in the position. And those were authorized, that process was authorized and administered by personnel regulations. Now, that process has been suspended since FY 2001 and has not been reinstated. So there's been a lot of work around with that. Yes, sir.
So how was it suspended in 2001? Was it suspended by executive order?
Executive directive, yes, sir.
Okay, so it was not anything done legislatively. The governor in 2001 suspended it, and none of them have reinstated it since.
Correct.
And the effect of that was every year the person moved up a step, regardless of how competent they were in their job?
There was a performance requirement at the time. It was a satisfactory, which was the middle rating. An individual had to have a satisfactory rating, and then the first, I think, 2 steps were 6-month steps, and then the next step was started annually, and it was based on an employee's anniversary date. So from those points, if they had their most current review was at least satisfactory, then they would move.
Is there any way you could get us a timeline of some of these things so that we can see something other than me taking notes and not paying attention? 2001,
Yes, sir.
the steps were suspended by executive order.
Correct.
Okay. Of yours? Now, okay. Does anybody else have any questions right now while I'm making notes? Okay, sorry to interrupt you there.
No problem. Other types of increases for classified employees are primarily driven by changes to duties, and there's various actions that those occur by, and those are all controlled by personnel regulations. So for example, some changes to duties are significant enough that it would be a reallocation, which means that the employee would be assigned to another job classification. Almost always that is upwards, but there are provisions in the regulation if that does result in a downward reallocation. Similarly, a classified employee can apply for a higher level position, which would then be a promotion. Some job classes have automatic movement to the next higher level, either after a certain amount of time or the passage or attainment of certain credentials. So this can either be done pursuant to the specifications in the job class, which would say after 1 year, if you have more than 1 year, you move here, or they can be through an approved progression plan.
And who approves those certifications that they have to get the pay increase?
The Department of Administration approves all job classifications for the classified service. So that would be something that would be either requested and then we would approve it as part of our job classifications.
So just to use an example, let's say an equipment operator at Department of Transportation gets his certification to do inspections during road construction, then your agency signs that on a proposal then from the Secretary of Transportation in a situation like that?
It would be if that is a condition to move to the next higher level of job classification, then it could be automatic. Now, the Department of Transportation has a couple of progression plans that are pre-approved. They're midpoint increases. So a person comes in as a trainee, they then move to an equipment operator. Let's use that one. They then move to a senior level, and it's based on a set of criteria that the agency has developed. So that would be roughly moving 1 pay grade. So it'd be a 5% increase roughly. They have a midpoint increase that we have approved, which is essentially an in-grade progression, that once they hit half of those required credentials to move up, then they would get that 2.5%. Then when they achieve those, they would automatically move up as a classification.
But who has to approve? Let's say the Secretary of Transportation wants to allow someone to move to a different pay grade based upon receiving a certification, does she have to get your approval before she can implement that?
It would have to be in accordance with either the classification specifications, or yes, they would have to get approval from the Department of Administration to apply a program like that.
Okay.
And in addition to those, that is also something that we've seen with law enforcement, with the Highway Patrol, with KBI, with the Natural Resource. Now, those are more time and rank, and that's fairly common for law enforcement type positions. So those are also career progression plans that are in place.
And okay, so we've been talking about classified so far. Now, let's say 3 or 4 years ago, you decided to go unclassified, and you got those certifications. How do you increase your pay grade?
That would be, again, it would just be a pay increase. There's no grade that an unclassified person is assigned to. So it'd just be a request to provide an increase for that individual, which would then, it's submitted to my office, gets approved by the Division of Budget, and then has to be for all unclassified positions that are in agencies under the governor's jurisdiction. There has to be an appointment letter signed by the governor's office, the Director of Appointments.
So if the Secretary of Transportation wants to give an unclassified person a bump because they become more valuable, they got to get your approval. They got to get the Department of Budget's approval. They got to get the governor signed off on it. And I missed somebody else. There's a fourth person in there.
Nope, that's
Okay.
it.
So they got to get through Secretary Lorenz, you,
It'd be me,
Prophet.
Adam Prophet, and then the governor's office has to sign off on it. Now, the governor's sign off is required by statute. So that's.
Because they're unclassified?
Correct. So back to the classified. Another tool that allows classified employees to move in pay is to establish a starting higher rate. And that is done pursuant to the authority in the personnel regulations, and that is approved by the Office of Personnel Services. And if an agency has difficulty in filling positions, getting applicants for a position, they can request to move that to a higher step. Like I said, that starts from 1, they could say, we need to go up to 8. That's what we need to do. So that is something that can be approved. And essentially what we look at is we look at the turnover, we look at the number of candidates and applicants for pools, and we also look at market data. So if we see that those things are all coming together, that's something that can be approved. Now, that can be granted to a specific job class, a specific agency, or even a specific region as part of the personnel regulations. Now, when approved, in addition to allowing the agency to hire at that rate, any classified employee in the area at which that's approved who makes less than that moves up to that. So that is also something that we've seen a lot of. If you look at the handout that we provided over the last 10 years, you see a lot of that because our starting wages have been very, very poor. And so as we've moved up, you see a lot of that establishing approval for higher starting pay, which then moves all employees up to that. Now, the last tool that has been utilized recently is for differentials. Now, differentials have been used in the state for a long time. The most common one is the shift differential, where an employee working a shift other than the day shift gets an additional amount of pay for working those hours outside the day shift. And essentially, a differential is an hourly premium pay, and it's based on a specific set of circumstances. So there's other examples that include premium pay for KDOT employees who are working on snow removal. And then the most recent one would be with the 24/7 facilities. Those are conditional. So the key with differentials is when the circumstance goes away, then the differential goes away. They do not build into base. They sit on top of base for pay purposes. So going back to the implementation of unclassified increases, and we've already addressed what happens in executive branch agencies under the governor. Technically, the judicial and legislative branch are unclassified. So those branches administer their own pay plans. Similarly, within the executive branch, the universities and the Board of Regents, they're all unclassified. They administer their own. There are some certain executive branches that are not under the governor's jurisdiction. So CAPERS, other statewide elected officers, those agencies, they establish their own pay plan for unclassified employees. But if there are classified employees in those agencies, they are subject to all the rules of the classified. The best example of that would be the KBI special agents. All the attorneys in the Attorney General's office are unclassified, and the Attorney General sets those. The KBI special agents are still classified, so their pay increases are through executive directives and are basically on the pay matrix. So let's see. The other example would be kind of like what you said, Mr. Chairman, when someone wants to make increases for a group of employees, what they do is they typically reach out to the Department of Administration, and we loop in budget, of course, to make sure that there's necessary funding. And then we devise a way to implement that. And as you can see, there's various tools. Now, if it's all unclassified employees, it's a pretty easy implementation. We just go through, we get the letters generated, and you're good to go. If they're classified employees, we have to issue an executive directive, and it's either a combination of assigning different pay grades, approving steps within the grade, approving above-step hiring authority. There's all kinds of tools, and it really depends on the particular situation. When it is an agency-only class, it is much easier to deal with. When you have generic, admin support, HR, IT, those types of positions that impact every state agency, that's a lot trickier to deal with. So as you'll see again in those handouts, a lot of the groups getting attention are very specific to a particular set of agencies or industries. So we've been able to get very focused on those. So another question that was asked specifically, and apparently there will be a presentation on it after this, was the impact of legislative actions on pay plans. So traditionally, the pay increases directed by the legislature have applied to all classified employees. And then the agencies had the discretion to apply the unclassified increases based on their own discretion. For all classified employees, those pay increases are implemented in two ways. The first would be a general increase. And a general increase is adjusting that entire matrix up by whatever percentage it is. Those increases don't have to be either 2.5% or 5% because you're moving the whole matrix up. The other way that pay increases for classified employees have been implemented are through step. So we say employees in this particular job class or all classified employees receive 2 steps. Now, those would have to be in 2.5% increases to fit onto the matrix. So for unclassified employees in that same example, let's say it was a 5%. The agencies would receive the total of 5% to cover 5% increase for all employees. And then they could then assign those increases however they wanted. It could vary, or they could go straight across and go 5%. And that's called the old merit pool process. In recent years, they've been mostly provided as across the board, just kind of to link up with the classified increases that have been received. So there have also been examples in from legislative directives for increases being approved for specific groups of employees. And again, whether that's in the form of market adjustments multiple years ago or specific agency requests that come up in various committees, in those situations, depending on the amounts provided, it's a combination of reassignment of job classes to different pay grades or steps. So it's essentially the same thing we would do for making an increase for all classified employees. We just kind of narrow it down to the particular job classifications. Now, in the past several years, the pay increases directed by the legislature have been more specific. In 2017 and 2018, there was kind of a look back, and the increases provided were based on increases that the employees had either received or not received, and that determined it. Yes, sir.
Can I interrupt you for just a second?
Absolutely.
Obviously, I hadn't looked at my packet well enough. I think the stuff he's talking about is on this handout.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, I mean, if you want to follow along on some of that.
Sure. And in addition, language in the legislation that implemented those increases excluded certain groups. And traditionally, that's been those that have an existing practice for pay movement, like the troopers, were regularly excluded. We're tied to an external system, which I believe is a group for the State School for the Blind and State School for the Deaf that are tied to, I think, teacher pay in Olathe, I believe. Or they'd been specifically approved otherwise by the legislature to get an increase. So those came back in, and so we had to kind of remove them from when we implemented. Now, as you can imagine, if that had impacted classified employees and it had been an amount other than 2.5 or 5, there's really no way that we could do that, because the only way to do that would be to increase the entire matrix. So fortunately, those exclusions, the amounts that have been approved have been 2.5 or other types of increments. So we've been able to get away with that. So I would say if there is any interest as things move forward in doing that, remember that 2.5 increment issue for classified employees. Otherwise, because I believe in the last few years, the proposed increases that in the governor's budget have been for general increases. So if there's any change to that, that's definitely something that needs to be thought of as far as an implementation perspective. Turning specifically to the pay adjustments that have happened since 2011, as you can see, the number and complexity of the pay adjustments have increased in recent years. Now, it is not only that we've basically been able to kind of fine tune and adjust where the need is most. The tools that we have, we've really been able to refine how we do that. And again, I refer back to the places that have most needed it have been industry specific, agency specific. So we have been able to kind of zone in on that, much like with the 24/7 pay increases recently. So there's essentially, in general, there's essentially 3 ways to administer pay. So you can adjust the entire structure, you can move people individually, or you can do a targeted approach. The general perspective for compensation is that if you're doing 2 of those things regularly, you've probably got a pretty solid compensation system. As you can see, we haven't done a combination of 2 for many years. So what has happened is, since the first and the second are not being done, everything has been done on the third, where we focus in on the specific individuals. There have been some small increases, general increases in recent years, but if that's not done regularly, we find ourselves in the situation where our pay plan as a whole is really, really lagging behind market, and we really have to deal with some of the things that we've dealt with through some of the tools that I've described. So while that addresses specific issues, it creates complaints about internal equity. It creates complaints about, well, I could go over here and I could make this, or it really, and it's essentially a triage issue where you have to decide what is really, where's the problem that we really have to solve immediately. And that's where we have to kind of apply everything. So that's basically the end of my general comments. Those are all the tools that are really available. If you have any questions about specifics, I'd be happy to try and answer those or go into any further detail.
Is anybody, Representative Poskin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question about the market wage data. Is that something that you produce internally in your department?
Yes, we do. We conduct a market survey of 1/3 of the workforce every 3 years. So that's on a cycle. That's also in statute. I believe it's 752939B or A, one of the two. So that is something that we do. We also participate in a group of other state governments, the National Compensation Association of State Governments. So we compare to the other governments. Our survey includes local, private, other public employers within the state of Kansas. And what we do is we don't identify the job as a name. We say, hey, here's what this job does. You guys tell us what it is. You give us a match on that, and then we match and we compile the 2. So we do generate an annual, basically, summary of those results. Sure.
Representative Delperdane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was still taking notes. I was trying to. Yeah. I've heard comments, and I think it was specific from KDOC people, but don't hold me to this, but they have received pay increases in the last 12 months, but yet they also received increases in the amount they pay on insurance premiums. They're even above the pay increases. Is that any inside information on that, or?
If that's actually another office within the Department of Administration. That would have to be a pretty substantial increase. I could see a situation where if an employee was in, say, single coverage, and in the open enrollment period, they moved to single plus dependent or family coverage, that would definitely have a lot more employee cost as a part of that. So even a pay increase might kind of be eaten up by that kind of an increase. But in general, I don't think that the rates across the board, if you stayed where you were, went up significantly for this plan year.
And then may I continue, Chair? Okay. The pay raises, I think you talked about when they are applied to new hires. Are they applied across the board so that I don't have new hires coming in making more than somebody that's been there 5 or 10 years?
In the most recent thing, what we did is there was a combination of establishing a new starting rate, which is what all the new people would come in. But then there were also increases for current employees. So we try not to do that. Now, I will say in the past, if we approve a higher starting rate and there's no additional increases, you will have employees coming in, new employees coming in, who will be making as much as employees who may have been there for quite a while. And that's that compression issue that when pay doesn't move along that horizontal axis, that's what happens when we have to do that.
And then one more, how does this reflect on, and I'm going to call it just contract employees, for example, KDOC, they've got medical staff that aren't really part of KDOC, it's contracted out. And my understanding, again, they're hurting on staff, so they've possibly done some increases, again, with starting pay, but it's put those people coming in way above people who have been there for a substantial time. But that may not be any part that you have any control of, so if that's...
Correct. We administer the pay for state employees. The agencies, if they have a contract, that would be something that the agency would set up.
So you don't have anything to do with contracts or anything at that point?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Weigel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is going to be like a two-part question.
All right.
And I think you kind of answered, I don't, if you could just go back over again, you said if a new hire comes in, that's like a non-classified, and then you have somebody that's in a position that's been there for, say, 5, 8 years, and that new hire comes in, and they're either at that guy's, the person's been there for 5, 8 years, or actually hired at a higher rate. How do you go about equitizing that?
And that's hard to do. Now, you do have some situations where, for example, if you bring in a new employee with exceptional qualifications, and that is based on that individual's specific experience or credentials, that they can come in at a higher rate. And in that situation, if they have those exceptional qualifications, then that is a deliberate agency decision. So that's not really as much of a compression issue as something that if we increase the hiring rate for all. In those situations, there's really not a whole lot we can do if we create that higher rate and then move everybody up to that rate. What we'd have to do would be to then go back in and, move everybody out, and there's just really no mechanism on that based on years of service or something, short of the adoption of a plan, for example, like the Highway Patrol has done, or for an ongoing moving forward based on years of service or acquisition of skills.
Okay, and this is kind of directed at the, well, not just the Highway Patrol. On your last point there on the little sheet, January 2022, it says 2.5 pay increase for all non-supervisory KHP troopers and LEOs. Are you talking about any other law enforcement agencies other than the troopers, or are you talking about certain class of LEOs within the KHP?
It is a specific class within the KHP, as their class title is law enforcement officer, so I apologize for that.
So you're talking about like Capitol Police or?
Those, and then I think there are also some who administer at the motor carrier inspectors. They're over the motor carrier inspectors. So yes, but there's a small group of them.
Because I get questions about this quite a bit, because I had 25 years in as a LEO in Department of Revenue, as a revenue enforcement agent.
Right.
And specifically, because most of those people are gone now. I retired 10 years ago, and most of them have retired. But it's the scenario that you just told me, is that some of the new hires that came in, they were actually making more starting than those agents that have been there over 5 to 10 years. And I had a hard time explaining that to them, so.
That's tough, and then you also have, like, for example, the KBI and KHP. You kind of had the same thing. If we increase the KHP, pretty much guaranteed KBI will be coming in wanting to either get there or get above. In the same way with enforcement agents, again, there's also on top of this, you've got different bargaining units there. So they're covered by different MOAs. The most recent increase for the troopers was pursuant to their memorandum of agreement. It had in there that in the first pay period in calendar year 2022, all those career progression plans moved up. So that's why that was part of that. That was done in January at that time.
When you're talking about KHP, what do you consider non-supervisory personnel in the KHP? Is that like just a road trooper or a master trooper, or?
It's the troopers, I think it stops at lieutenant. So master trooper, and then the I don't know if the trainees are covered, but so it'd just be those two would be the non-supervisory.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Delperdane.
Thank you for letting me ask again. You handed this out. Would you have, and I'm not looking for a ream of paper, but maybe a follow-up to tell us, because to me it's meaningless without knowing what the job pay grades are.
So
In other
what-
words, who's it referred to?
What jobs are assigned to those particular pay grades?
Would you have just some sort of a high-level one without going through a book to look it up? or-
We'll have to go back and check. I think we do have that. What I can do is provide kind of some samples of the types of positions that would come in before this committee, their class specifications, which shows you this is what they have to have in order to be this is a description, and it also talks about their pay grade assignment.
I just want to ask him a question in line with what you said. So how big is that book that would deal with our deals? I mean, I'm kind of curious.
There's quite a few classifications. For example, KDOT has some very, they have 4 or 5 levels of engineering tech, equipment operator, highway maintenance supervisor. You have the trooper classes, you have the LEOs, you have all the correction series. So I could just take some snapshots of those and.
Is that good?
Yeah, they're about 3 or 4 pages for like a multi-level.
The Highway Patrol
Sure,
and
sure.
KDOC and
Sure.
KDOT, the more common ones. I don't know that we really care about some of the other positions that there's not hundreds of them,
Sure. I can do that.
No, because I'm looking at this, and let's just pick on the troopers. You mentioned there's a trooper, there's a trainee, there's a master, but yet I've got 20 steps here in the pay grade, so I'm just trying to make some sense out of that.
Sure.
So, and then the other part where the gentleman next to me was talking about the pay increases for the troopers and Leos, right below that is it's $3,500 bonuses for exempt staff in 24/7 facilities. Could you just,
Correct.
a little few words on that?
The differential is for hourly employees. So if you're a salaried employee, you can't really receive that hourly differential. some FLSA issues that we don't want to run afoul of there. So in turn, what we did was we provided the $3,500 bonus, which is the maximum bonus allowable under state statute for those individuals in the 24/7 facilities that were salaried, but basically helping out on those types of duties.
And so for 24/7 facilities, is that prison facilities, or is it troopers work 24/7?
It'd be a facility. It'd be the prisons, it'd be the hospitals, and it'd be the veterans' homes. Those are the
That's what I was
three
looking
types.
for. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Vice Chair Resman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Weigel made me think about something for the troopers and their pay. So the supervisory personnel are not going to get a pay raise.
I believe we actually matched that. I think that what I listed there was based on the MOA. I believe we did provide that for the Elliott or for the lieutenants and the captains. I don't know if the majors or anyone else would have gotten that. I'll have to check on that. I think that executive directive may have not gone out by the time when I was drafting this up. So I'll check on that and verify
I
that.
was just looking at this and it looks like they're starting to compress again, so.
The way they've constructed their career progression plans is actually, they've got it so that the highest paid master trooper doesn't make any more than the lowest paid lieutenant. So that was pretty deliberate in the creation, and I think we built in 5%. So the 2.5, I don't think would take anything there. Now, they get a little bit closer, but I don't think it'd take anybody up over the top. But I'll check on that and verify.
Other questions? So I've got just a little bit. So one of the things I hear, and for instance, we're talking about KDOT here, is some of the issues at the CDL license. They hire someone, they get them trained as a CDL, they go into private practice. And so it doesn't seem like we're staying comparable to private sector policies when I hear that. Would you like to respond to that specifically?
That would be kind of more of a retention issue, and that's, we really discuss with agencies when they come to us. Like, for example, if they ask us, we'd really like to increase our hiring rate. Our question is, are you getting them in the door, but can you keep them? So I think what you're doing there is in that situation, they're able to get new employees, but holding on to them is the difficulty. And in that kind of a situation, what we would look at would be one of those midpoint increases. So for the equipment operators, they have an automatic progression system, but there's only so many levels that they can move up. So that would be an issue of, we either create more space between that entry level and then say create 2 or 3 pay grades above that and then create some intermediate steps. That's something that we could do. I know that KDOT was asking about the various types of opportunities, and I know that they're interested in looking at something. The most recent was, I believe, they were having a hard time getting people in the door. And so that's what we focused on, was increasing that hiring rate. But the retention issue now, I think, is becoming more obvious because they've had that increase. And quite frankly, I think in some parts of the state, they're still having trouble getting people in the door.
Well, and I think one of the things is even private sector is having troubles finding employees, but some of these have been long-standing issues at the state, and we need to figure out a way to address them. Go ahead, Representative Resman.
Mr. Chairman, with pay raises, is there anything else we can do besides just give somebody a pay raise? Can we not give them as much pay raise, but do something else like pay for more of their health insurance or pay more into their retirement, kind of offset that?
Those are both possibilities. The retirement, that'd be a Capers question
I realize,
yeah.
just the amount of money that would have cost, would it be cheaper to do it that way, but yet the employee pays in less, so they would get a pay raise as a result of paying in less?
Right. There's, looking at it from a total comp perspective, those are both issues. There's also been the work-life balance. Do we give more leave? Which is great, but with the prisons and the hospitals, they can't use the leave. So we've looked at those types of things. That's definitely something that we could look at. The healthcare costs, that's a long process. We have the Healthcare Commission. There are other public employers that participate, so it wouldn't be able to be narrowly focused on the state, but it's definitely something that could be considered.
You mentioned leave, so employees get that per pay period?
Correct.
And is there a max that they can accumulate?
There is no maximum on sick leave. You earn 3.7 hours of leave per pay period, which is essentially 12 days a year. Vacation steps up as your longer-term employees accrue more. There are maximums. The very maximum is 240 hours of vacation leave that you can accrue more than that. But at the end of the year, it's a use it or lose it situation. If you don't get down under 240, you lose.
Okay, so what about the possibility if they go above 240, is there a way to pay them?
Those
so they don't lose it?
Oh, to pay out?
Yeah.
There could be. I think that was done as a pilot, I want to say by KDOT several years ago. So I think it has been done. Technically, it could. If you separate from state service, you are paid out for your accumulated leave up to the maximum. So there's certainly ways that could be done.
Representative Delberdane.
Thank you for the third time, Chairman.
And by the way, everybody in committee, I do apologize because sometimes we run late, but unless we're running late, our committee deals with some pretty intricate details on some of these budgets, and I think this is one we need to really understand. So never feel guilty about coming back for the third time unless it's 6:30 or something like that, and we've ran an hour past. I mean, really, truly, we need to get the information we can. So anyway, go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to pick on state troopers again just because we've been talking about them. But if you look back, I want to say 2, 3 years, 4 years, we were running recruit classes of 40, 50 new people coming in. 2 years ago, I think we had 6. I think last year we had 5. Is it strictly pay? Is it something else? What is causing that?
I can't answer that for sure. I can say that starting pay for the troopers is definitely something that needs to be adjusted. That's certainly something from a market perspective that would be beneficial. I can't say for sure what it is, what their other types of situations may be. It could be a reflection of, our standing in market where in certain places, trooper pay is really, really good. In other places, it may not be as comparable to maybe the local sheriff's department or police department. It just kind of varies. Since it's a statewide classification, it's kind of hard to pinpoint that, but I would say that pay is absolutely part of it, at least for getting the employees in the door to the training classes.
Yeah. And would you say same is true with corrections officers?
Corrections
but I don't know if
officers-
it's quite to that extent. But
The corrections officers are so challenging because they've always been a high turnover class. It's a tough job. The troopers, their training academy is kind of a set for corrections officers. When they walk in the door, they have a series of things to go through. Where you see the turnover there, and we asked for turnover information from them, was the number of involuntary departures that occurred within the first couple of months. So you have people just like, this is not for me. So in part of the 24/7 changes that we made was for entry-level corrections officers, we left the base pay where it is, but after 3 months, they get 2.5%. After 9 months, they get another 2.5%. After 12 months, they automatically move up to a corrections officer 1B. So they get 5% there. So if you stay for a year, you're getting 10%. So that is more of a retention kind of an issue. Certainly getting more people in the door is also beneficial, and that's where we think the differentials kind of inflate that pay as well. So hopefully what we'll hear from corrections in the next month or so is that they have been able to get more people in the door, and they've been able to hold on to people that they ordinarily may have lost a couple of months ago.
Do we have any statistics specific to correctional officers who have gone through that progression and not necessarily left the state, but maybe moved up to something else? Or I guess you could say left the state because they went on to bigger aspirations with the career as in sheriffs or local PD or.
Yeah, once they would leave, all we would have would be the separation for whatever it was. Now, an employee can say, I left for higher pay or I resigned to take another position, but they don't necessarily have to tell us that. We do exit interviews, and again, it's up to what the employee shares with us. But I know corrections maintains very detailed turnover reports about the numbers and everything, so I know that they have that kind of information.
Yeah, because I'm just saying it's one thing if they're leaving because they're disgruntled or they're leaving because it's just a normal career step going somewhere else.
Right.
And, okay, thank you.
Ranking Minority Member Poskin, since I called
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Vice Chair Resnick.
Would it be possible to get data maybe on the top 10 or 20 jobs, positions in our budgets that are furthest away from the market data, and then maybe some corollary information about recruiting and retention and turnover?
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
Do you have any kind of intuitive idea what the most pressing general need in state government is? Is it base pay? Is it lower cost of health insurance? Or is it capers? Or is there a fourth one that I'm not coming up with? Working conditions or something?
What I would say is the second and third are kind of situational. If you've got someone close to retirement, of course, that's going to be important to them. If you have someone who has a family on their coverage, that's going to be important. Base pay impacts everyone. So I think that is, in general, what most employees would say when they talk about, hey, we need pay increases. They are talking about their base pay. It also impacts your capers. It impacts what you can pay towards your health insurance, all those types of things. It's also probably the most expensive when you look at it. If you did hey, we're going to go back and we're going to move every employee up the market. We're going to do it as if we never got rid of step movement. Costing that out would be significant. So now how that compares to capers or what it would be, I can't say for sure, but I would say most employees are going to say that base pay is the biggest need.
And it seems like a lot of the employees that have been talking to me have been mostly concerned, and I hope we're not creating, I think I heard from someone that maybe we're creating some kind of wage compression issue with the highway patrol. But that's what I'm hearing is kind of these wage compression issues. You know, in Department of Corrections, I've heard about wage compression issues when we gave the raises a couple of years ago to the corrections officers with unit counselors, I believe. I hear that at KDOT that some guys worked there for 8 years, and because of our recent increases in KDOT, the guy that just got hired makes almost as much as he does. Is there anything on your end? I mean, how do you feel about those wage compression issues that we've got? And is there any way for us to effectively address those other than to shine light on the issues?
You know, I think it is again, it's looking at it as a retention issue rather than, I think the first reaction of a lot of agencies is recruitment. Increase the hiring rate, increase the hiring rate. We're not getting enough people. So I think that's kind of a primary focus. The other thing is you hear about some of the compression issues. You know, and it's difficult. I'm very popular for saying this, but there's certain jobs that, you know, once you get to a certain level of pay, you're above market. So do we continue to add 5-10% to that? I don't know. Is that person leaving? Or do we really direct our attention to the places where the need is the most? And I think the most recent pay increases that we've done have more been directed towards where there's a significant problem. I do think that whenever possible, we try to address compression issues. For example, when the unit team was left out in 2017, I think that was a budget issue that they desperately needed it for the CO1s and 2s and the supervisors, so they had to cut the unit team and the counselors out. This time around, we tried to bring that back, and actually, by increasing their pay grade and approving them higher rate of pay, they received a bigger increase than the uniform staff just because it was being caught up, just like the parole officers. We did a significant increase there with the 2 types. Now, again, that's on the bottom end, the entry level, but then we have to have some additional movement. That's time and money. And again, it's a matter of need. And the need was getting people in the door or holding on to them, so.
And this will probably be my last question. So I've heard this story, and again, I'm trying to make sure that I truly understand the ins and outs of it. Somebody at one of the agencies took a sick day on Tuesday, let's just say. They got called out for emergency duty on Saturday. When they worked on Saturday, whatever that did, that made their straight pay for that week being over 40 hours. And so they cut back their sick day from earlier in the week so that they only got 40 hours that week. So for instance, let's say you take off Tuesday to go to the doctor. You get called out on the weekend for an emergency. You wind up working 44 hours. So then they only gave them 4 hours sick leave instead of 8, let's say on Tuesday. Is that a standard? I totally get them not getting time and a half.
Right.
I mean, I totally understand that. But what's the rationale to cut their sick leave back by the number of hours they worked on the weekend, as from a human resources perspective?
Yeah, there's a rearranged time, kind of a situation where that would be is like, hey, I'm gonna knock off 2 hours here and I'm gonna work 2 additional hours tomorrow and I'm gonna total up to 40. But I'd have to kind of get some more details on that situation to give you an answer on that. The way leave is used is covered in our regulations pretty clearly. So maybe we can follow up with you and get some specifics on that, and we can get you analysis on that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions before we let him off the hook? Hey, thank you so much. Sure. I really, we've been getting emails from our constituents for a year now, and I really want to, talk about the problems, and this is one of those years where we may be able to address some of them if we know what to do in an appropriate manner. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have Merle to give us another overview.
Actually, we're going to start with a different analyst, and I'll pick up about midway through.
So I should not introduce myself as Merle.
Welcome to the committee, Merle.
Hi. Good afternoon, committee. My name is Stephen. I'm fiscal analyst with the Legislative Research Department. I, along with Merle, will be speaking to this memo that you should all have a copy of. I'm going to cover the first roughly half of it, whereas Merle will cover the remainder. Much of the first half of it is background information, and much of that will be similar to what Craig has testified to. So the authority over employees in the state are largely based on whether or not they are classified or unclassified. The governing law for that is the Kansas Civil Service Act, which dictates the 2 types of employees. For classified employees, these are largely specific classes of employees. They're largely based on specific duties and responsibilities. They're hired through a competitive process. And for unclassified employees, these are functionally at-will employees. They can be hired or filled through direct appointment. Doesn't have to be competitive. The thing to note here is that legislation passed by the 2015 legislature revised the Civil Service Act such that newly hired positions they're all automatically placed in that unclassified bucket. Now, as it comes to pay, classified employee pay is largely governed by statewide pay plans. These are based on steps, as Craig indicated. Steps are roughly 2.5% of an employee's salary. In 2008, the legislature established 5 pay plans at the recommendation of the State Employee Oversight Commission. Those pay plans are detailed on this. An overview of those pay plans are available on the second page in the bulleted list. So in general, the legislature can modify pay plans for these employees, but those adjustments are ultimately, they need to be approved by the governor's office. And for unclassified employee pay, these are largely at the discretion of their appointing authority. And similarly, in order to enact or implement these increases to unclassified employee pay, the legislature not only needs to pass an appropriations bill funding those increases, but also the governor's office needs to sign off on that bill as well. Now, at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions on the overall background for this. But if not, I'll turn the mic over to Merle, who can cover the agency-specific details on these pay plans.
Any questions for Stephen at this point? Okay.
All right, good afternoon, committee. Mr. Chairman, I am looking on page 3. Just a little ways down, you'll see a header, House Committee on Transportation and Public Safety specific items. So we try to pull out some items that are relevant to just this committee. So as was mentioned, there was a movement to transition to the unclassified pay system. While several agencies with budgets heard in House Transportation Committee have transitioned to unclassified positions in recent years, there are still some agencies that retain a large number of classified employees. And actually across the state in general, you'll see most of the remaining classified employees are actually within the public safety agencies. So you'll see down there a table that kind of breaks down all the budgets that will be heard in this committee, divides the number of classified and unclassified within that. And you'll see that the top agencies that still retain those classified positions is the Kansas Department of Corrections, the Department of Transportation, Highway Patrol, and the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. So you'll see some of those top ones are protective services agencies. Going a little way down on page 3, just want to hit on a couple of agencies that I think serve as examples to illustrate some questions about authorities, like who recommends these salary adjustments or who approves them. And so sort of the first example would be the Department of Corrections. And this is kind of picked as an example because it is a large agency with a lot of classified employees. So as it says, the majority of employees are classified at correctional facilities, and that pay is set according to that statewide plan. So this is primarily attributed to a desire to minimize competing pay for positions with similar duties and responsibilities at other state agencies, such as state hospitals. So it sort of equates all those that have similar duties and roles at different agencies. Adjustments to that pay plan would require approval by the governor and an appropriation from the legislature if additional money from the state general fund was needed to support that pay increase. Kind of the next scenario is looking at the Department of Transportation. So here we have an example of a large agency with a large amount of unclassified positions. So the chief administrative officer of each division within the department is the appointing authority, and they are subject to approval by the Secretary of Transportation. As such, the agency and those appointing authorities may determine compensation for these unclassified positions, subject to the approval of the governor. If additional funds are needed for those salary adjustments, a request is made to the legislature through the annual appropriations process. Next, we have the Highway Patrol, which is a medium-sized agency, but has some specific powers within that agency. So the majority of employees at the Kansas Highway Patrol serve in classified positions, but unlike other agencies with lots of classified positions, statute provides the superintendent the authority to fix salaries for all classified positions at the Kansas Highway Patrol. So that doesn't always occur for agencies. It's not always defined in statute that the agency head can fix salaries like that. So this has resulted in separate classified pay plans for troopers at KHP and memorandums of agreement with the Kansas State Trooper Association regarding compensation. So sort of the last scenario is a smaller agency, but it's different because it involves a board. The employees of the Kansas Sentencing Commission serve exclusively as unclassified. So they have all moved over to the unclassified portion. The 17-member commission has the appointing authority for the executive director and staff and may determine compensation for those for those unclassified positions, subject to approval, again, of the governor. If additional funds are needed for those salary adjustments, a request is again made to the legislature as part of the annual budgeting process. And then finally, on the last 2 pages, you'll see, as we talked about over the years, there has been some base budget increases provided, and there has been some funding provided for step increases, so that gives you a little bit of a timeline. But I can certainly stand for questions on those scenarios of those different agency and who's the authority to approve.
I think Representative Resman wants to make sure that we don't have a typo in this.
Okay, under the Department of Corrections, it shows it's that most of the employees are unclassified, but if you look at the chart there you have in the box, they're at 2,338, and yet unclassified are 758. Should they be reversed?
I'm sorry, that is a typo on page 3. That should read, correctional facilities in Kansas serve, the majority serve in classified positions, not unclassified. So the table is correct, that amount is correct, but it should have said, the text should have said classified.
Any other questions for Merle? Representative Delperdang.
Thank you, Chair. Just trying to grasp onto this. I'm going to drag you back to the previous speaker's handout, which I know you're not responsible for, but it talked about a proposed 5% statewide pay increase, general increase. So is that part of what's reflected under your handout for 22, but it only talks about the judicial branch? Because it talks about 5% for judges and then 2.7 to 12 for other.
So I'm not sure, I'm not totally familiar with his handout, but I believe he's referencing a 5% proposed increase, statewide increase that was proposed last year.
Well, it says for 22, so.
Yeah, I think Representative Delperdang, since you don't have it, the 5% for judicial branch judges and justices and 2.7 to 12% for judicial branch non-judge personnel is something we passed in appropriations last year. And then the 2022 that he's talking about, the proposed 5% statewide pay increase, and then the two underneath that were items that were in the governor's budget. The 5% obviously has not been approved by appropriations. And she did the 2.5% and the 3,500 by executive order and with the State Finance Council spark money, didn't she?
That's correct. So that differential and the 3,500 is part of the 24/7 pay plan.
Does that make sense,
Yeah,
Representative Delperdang?
It helped. But, and then back on your handout where it talked about 5% judges and then I'm going to say 2.5 to 12% for judicial branch non-judge personnel. Would you have any more breakdown of that? And what I'm looking for is 5% for a judge that's making $125,000 a year versus 5% for a judicial worker who's making $20,000 a year. That's a huge difference in a pay increase there.
Yeah, we can get that information.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for anybody? Okay, so before we let everybody go, we're gonna do corrections tomorrow. Secretary Zamuda will be here, and then we'll also have some information on salary issues in the community corrections, which are a separate agency underneath the Department of Corrections. So if you've had anybody reach out, we've all got those emails. You might want to get familiar with them. Okay. Is there anything else for the committee? Okay. If not, we're adjourned. Thank you.